You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And this week we went back to our roots. We picked from our bucket, which is off screen. I reached my hand in and pulled out Danny Boyle's 2003 zombie classic, 28 Days Later, starring Doctor Who, Mad Eye Moody, and Cillian Murphy's penis.
That's right, Cillian Murphy's penis. Forgot that was in there. I've watched this movie back when it came out. I said in the group chat I've probably seen this movie 5 times because this was the movie that made me fall in love with zombies. This movie, to me, is upper echelon of zombie films. It doesn't rely heavily on the zombies. It relies more on humanity, more on the acting, which is phenomenal. Cillian Murphy's amazing. Brendan Gleeson, Christopher Eccleston, all fantastic in the film. The pacing is fantastic. This is an almost 2-hour film, and to me, it does not feel like 2 hours. There's enough to keep your attention as it goes on. It kind of follows the same beginning as The Walking Dead, where Rick wakes up in the hospital. Same thing with Cillian Murphy. He wakes up in a hospital bed after getting hit as a bike courier and wakes up to the collapse of society, which in 2003, when I saw this movie, I would have thought was absolute trash theory that society could collapse in 4 weeks, basically. And then COVID hit and everyone lost their mind over toilet paper. So I realized just how quick society could collapse at the most minor of inconveniences. Get the only bad part about the film out of the way. There's only one part of this film that I absolutely it's almost comical at how dumb it is. But the monkey scene in the beginning, when the scientist is explaining what they're infected with, and the answer is rage. What the kind of answer? Rage? You couldn't just say we don't know. That's why we're studying. No, they're infected with rage, and that's what causes the zombie apocalypse. Come on, that was the only part that was dumb. I absolutely believe that a group of people that think they're doing good could do something so horrendous because they're so full of themselves. They're so hell-bent on proving how righteous they are. Even when somebody is trying to explain things to them and shit starts to hit the fan and they're just like, oh, what? He was telling you it was going to happen. So I absolutely believe that that part of the movie could 100% happen. People will break into a lab trying to be virtuous and ruin us all. But all that to say, this movie, like I said, when it came out, I wasn't big into horror at the time. I get more into it, the older I got. Just how I ended up here. And obviously I'm the weak link when it comes to horror knowledge and history and viewing, but this one was one of the few movies back in the day when I used to watch nothing but action and comedies. I used to go to Walmart in the $5.75 7.50 section. They had them actually on racks instead of in a big bucket, and I would just pick movies based on the cover, and thought, that's a good way to spend your money. But then this one caught my eye, and it was just because the logo was so minimalist almost. You have the Biohazard logo. 28 days later, days later from what are we talking about? So I bought this, I watched it, and fell in love instantly. Like I said, the acting's fantastic. The storytelling is great. Everything that happens to them in it is believable. There's moments of heartache. The military scene, I 100% believe that would happen as well. I don't know if 28 days is a short enough amount of time for guys to get so horny that they're willing to rape a child, but that's what's presented to us. And also, if society collapses and you have a bunch of alpha males together, then we're probably gonna start fiending for something. But like I said, the pacing in this movie is so good for a 2-hour film. It keeps your interest. It keeps you paying attention to what's going on. Like I said, the writing and storytelling is so good. The acting's incredible. If you look back now, you can see how Cillian Murphy would someday have the career that he has now with Pinky Blinders and Oppenheimer. And speaking of Oppenheimer, I made a special background just for this just for this movie. Um, Give me 2 seconds.
Wrong
There we
movie.
go. That's right. This is Zombenheimer, the the epitome of zombie movies, starring Mr. Oppenheimer himself, Cillian Murphy. So I love this film. I absolutely would suggest for anybody if you're getting into um, Jay said I picked this because it was popular. If you're getting into popular films before you go into the B list or horror films or the deep dives, dark cuts, stuff like that, this would be a great entrance level horror film for just about anybody because it's so well done, it's so well written, it's so well acted, and that's all I've got to say.
All right, so I have had I had kind of an interesting introduction to this film because this film released technically in the UK the middle of October 2002. They were actually shooting it during they started shooting it before the September 11th attacks, and they were in the middle of filming during that, and I think that caused their production to kind of get delayed and their scheduling for the release later to get delayed, as a lot of films did during that time. But because there was a version of it out there floating around on the early 2000s internet at the end of 2002, me and my cousin were getting into downloading, which it would literally take like 3 days to download a full length feature film and then put it on 2 CDs. This was pre really DVD burner days for poor people. So we actually watched this film around Christmas time 2002. It didn't come out in the US wide release till the summer 2003. And we watched this on a Dreamcast on 2 different disc VCD. There's a handful of films where I have this in my story, and I love all of them to some degree because of the way that I discovered them reminded me of the most kind of recent version of like watching an old crappy VHS, like discovering something that's kind of not the best way to watch it, but it was kind of like things that were unknown in the US at the time because they either hadn't been released yet or they hadn't been released yet here. So the films like this that I watched like that were Shaun of the Dead, uh, House of a Thousand Corpses, only because it had been filmed and shelved for like 2 years before it got released, and this one, 28 Days Later. So I have a soft spot in my heart for all three of those films because of the way I first watched them. Also, for some random reason, the first time I ever watched Dario Argento's one of his masterpieces, Suspiria, I watched it on a 2 disc VCD that cut out at exactly the moment with the blind man and the dog. No spoilers there, but it was a terrible time to cut out the middle of that film. Anyway, back to 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle, who was mostly known at that point in time for 2 breakout films with a good friend of his that was coming up as an actor, Ewan McGregor. He basically is credited for discovering Ewan McGregor, giving him his film career. A movie called Shallow Grave in 1994 that was a very low budget indie kind of thriller, some horror overtones, but more of a thriller. Um, I think that got picked up by, I want to say, Miramax, kind of in the early Quentin Tarantino days where they were picking up any kind of stylish thriller type thing. And then in 96, he was really on the board with the movie Trainspotting, which was very big in the UK and across the pond, gave Danny Boyle a lot more opportunities. Apparently, Ewan McGregor was supposed to be the Cillian Murphy part in this film, but he and Danny Boyle had a falling out because he was also supposed to be the lead in the movie he did in 2000 that flopped at the box office, but people have started liking it in recent years. The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think the studio insisted on a more current, bigger name they could bank on. And Ewan and Danny didn't get along after that. So he had to put a then pretty well unknown person in the film. Uh, and thankfully, Cillian Murphy, great actor, was able to carry it, even though he'd only had a few small parts in film at that point in time. But written by the novelist at that time, Alex Garland, who has gone on to write some great stuff and direct some great stuff. Writer director of I think his first film was Ex Machina, which he got a Oscar nomination for best original screenplay, I think, on that. And he actually wrote the book of The Beach. So that's how he and Danny Boyle had made a connection. He wrote the book that got adapted to the screenplay of The Beach in 2000. So that was kind of off of the heels of what they had just worked on together. And I do believe that I think they collaborated because he also wrote Sunshine that Danny Boyle directed like 2007, about 5 years later. So they still have a good relationship, far as I know. But at this point in time, he was a unproven entity because the only major credit he had was a film that flopped at the box office and was kind of like at that point in time it was a joke. The Beach. That's not the Leonardo DiCaprio film anybody referenced in early 2000s. Even though it's got a cult following to some extent now. But this film, this was the first film I saw where zombies ran, and that was a big point of contention at that point in time. Also, this was the first film where there's two camps: are they zombies or are they the infected? Because they call them the infected in this film and in its sequel, and I presume the third part that's slated to come out next year in 2025. Um, I think, isn't it called 28 Years Later, something like that? Yeah. Because you had 28 days, then weeks, and then it's been so long. We'll just call it years. We skip months. We'll have to get the graphic novel months later, see where they were. But I always love this film because it's so gritty, and I do think to Kellen's point, The Walking Dead stole so much of this. Uh, Not as much the premise because I mean the post-apocalyptic zombie apocalypse type thing. That's George Romero did that 30 years before, right? To some degree, but the way that it was treated and where they concentrate on a small number of characters and the drama leads it more than the horror. The horror is accented more in the set pieces where you get the horror because you're just the fly on the wall with these characters, right? And I think that's the spirit of what made The Walking Dead work. And even to the opening, waking up in the hospital after all of the inciting events that created this zombie apocalypse have already happened, and then you're having to discover with this main character through the lens of this main character exactly what's going on. They actually had to close down like a major highway in London to be able to get some of those shots that are just barren and famous locations around England. It's to me, I think it's some of the most beautiful and haunting imagery there. That's really hard to do without CGI now. But they were able to get practical. I think they only had 2 hours that the cops were able to shut down some of the main roadways. So they had like a minute, I think, of usable footage for this, and it mostly shows up on the screen. And they got some gold in those 2 hours. So uh, I think it'd be a lot harder to do that nowadays, as big as these cities have been exploding in the last 20 years. But some great shots to live forever. And I think it really sells the opening isolation of, oh, this was a booming metropolis, but now all of a sudden it's like we're just empty streets. They also only cast uh, pretty high level athletes to play the zombies so that they could be like running and jumping like at high speeds to really sell that whatever this virus is, it makes you like go, 0 to 100 pretty fast. And I think that was a good choice. The camera work that Danny Boyle used to kind of accent the frenetic pace of those zombie scenes and the running from the zombies, like against the way that he shot the character stuff, I think it just works. Um, Drama wise, I think this is certainly a top three of probably the best acted zombie films. Um, the sequel loses a little bit of steam, but in terms of sequels, it's still pretty good, despite not having Cillian Murphy and some of the main stars back. The cool thing about Danny Boyle is he uses a lot of the same actors in a lot of films. I think Ewan McGregor was his muse, eventually would become his muse again after they kind of made up. Um, I'm not sure how many more uh, Cillian Murphy things. I think, was he in Sunshine? I can't remember. I think maybe he was. But I think this was certainly the biggest collaboration for them. And this was well received. It was one of the few films about a year before Shaun of the Dead would travel across the pond that would come here. A lot of people low key credit this as bringing back the zombie craze, and then Shaun of the Dead was kind of the 1-2 punch that made everybody go all out for zombies. And I'm here for it. I've been here for it, and I'm here for the sequel. What say you, John?
Um, yeah, I didn't really love this movie. Uh, First watch, I thought I'd seen it before. I guess I hadn't. I had seen the clips so many times, like the clips of a lot of the talking head docs. You'd see those clips back in the day where people would always talk about the best newer horror films. They talk about Saw, they talk about this, and they'd always show the clip of Cillian Murphy walking out of the hospital. They show the priest zombieing and out running after him. They would never show the end of the movie, but they would always show that. So I after I watched it, I realized I had seen that, and I had seen the end at some point because I recognized the whole soldier fight at the end, but I guess I just never watched it all the way. I don't know why. But yeah, I think that this is one of those times where I really can understand where Kellen's coming from with the nostalgia thing, because I don't really have nostalgia for this. I never was super interested in seeing it. I love Cillian Murphy. I just something about it never like jumped out to me. So when I watched it, it's a good movie. I think I've seen so many other things that I think do it better that I wasn't super impressed with it. Like Wreck, I thought did it better. Um Obviously I prefer Shaun of the Dead. It's a different movie. It's not fair to compare. Shaun of the Dead is not. It's a totally different type of movie, obviously, but I love Shaun of the Dead. I think I love the tone, the cinematic stuff. Romero, I'm very bigger on the cinematic take of zombie films. I just like it more. So this is very raw, brutal, like very bleak. Um, it's interesting, like you were talking about the inspirations, and you guys have touched on it, like The Walking Dead, the opening. They kind of ripped that off in Walking Dead, the pilot, where Rick wakes up in the hospital. And then you can see the homages like when they're at the grocery store. That's like an homage to Dawn of the Dead when they're doing the shopping spree. And
Minus
then
the penis, though. There's no
right, no penis. And then the end, the soldiers being bad and the zombie being tied up with the chain and then getting revenge. That's very much like Day of the Dead, right? That's kind of and it's just an homage. There's nothing wrong with that. People do it all the time. And Danny Bull probably was like a super huge fan of Romero. Um, I think that it's just one of those things where had I seen it at the time, I may have a different opinion of it. I've just seen so many things since then, and I've seen so many movies that I like better that in the zombie franchise. And plus, for me, I'm partial to the cinematic stuff with zombies. Some things like Children of Men. Children of Men is a movie that's like an end of the world movie, and it's kind of shot handy cam. but I love that movie way more. There's something about that works to me. This movie, watching it, I just like by the end of it, I was like, it's good, but I don't know. I didn't see the big deal. I could see the big deal in 2002, but now it's hard for me to like love it or give it a huge great rating. I know you
Even
guys
though
are,
they reference it in Shaun of the Dead and was partly inspired by this movie, and
yeah, I just
2007 was when Wreck came out, which was probably also partially inspired by this. You thug.
well, I just think I think is a scary film. I think Wreck is a lot scarier. But I wasn't really scared by this at all. I just thought it was very bleak and sad, very depressing. I thought the logic of how the zombies turn was kind of odd because if you think about it, the dad, he gets the crow drops the blood in his eye and he immediately turns. But at the end, Cillian Murphy goes through and just, gets blood all over him from everybody, from everyone. And then he doesn't turn. And it's like, you're telling me that blood did not get in some orifice on his body. Come on. Like,
Well, the people that he killed weren't infected.
yeah, but there were zombies. I mean, when you start making logic that blood going into your eye turns you, you might as well not do that because then all of it can be wiped. Any logic can be
That's
wiped out after
infected
that.
blood. You're making a point
Yeah,
that doesn't
but
make sense because
no,
the other people weren't infected. And the
those
eyes
zombies.
is a very specific place that you can get infected.
If you're killing people that are zombies and then they're turning into zombies and blood's going everywhere, that's going to go right
He
in
didn't
your
kill
face.
anybody that was a zombie. That's what I'm saying. The zombies were killing some of the soldiers, but he was killing other soldiers that weren't zombies.
Here's the thing. I think it's one thing to be like you get bit and you turn. It's another thing to be like blood of a zombie touches you, goes through a hole in your body, and you're immediately turned. I don't know why they wrote that. It's just a nitpick.
And
It's
he
not
didn't
one.
immediately turn. He rubbed his eyes and he
He
knew that it was happening.
he
And it was like,
turned in like 10 seconds.
it was
He
like a
literally
full
turned in
30,
10
and then they
seconds.
mentioned that it happens quick. That was in the story. They told that.
He
I don't
literally
think you
turned.
watched the movie. I think you were thumbing
I-
through a magazine and the movie was on in the background. You're like, oh.
TJ and I are going to head out. Let us know when you are done.
No, he literally turned in 10 seconds. Either way, it was a dumb thing to write in the script, in my opinion. I know it's revolutionary, but I think it's good. I just don't think it's as great as everyone says it is. But I also think it's one of those things where if you like bleaker takes on something like this or the sadness, I could see how, it'd be more your thing. I just didn't enjoy it as much. So, yeah.
I understand that. I think one of the only issue besides the beginning, that one line that Kellen already touched on, they're infected with what? Rage. Fucking terrible. Like, it's WWE.
It could be an acronym, like it could stand for something.
I doubt it. Rabies and garbage entailed. I don't know. But
Ebola.
There wasn't enough lore to it. That's what you're picking up on, I think, John, is like, we don't really know the rules. But that was the thing too. Like, I like movies that aren't aware of themselves. So like in this one, they don't really know what zombies are. Also, TJ touched on it. Are they zombies? Because they're still alive. So it's almost more of an infectious disease movie than a zombie movie. But I do enjoy this movie a lot. I saw it in theaters. It's a movie that kind of grabs you by the throat right from the jump, and it hardly ever lets go. I think the most depressing scene, it is a very bleak movie, but not along the lines of the original Speak No Evil. It just kind of makes you want to go to your bedroom and slit your wrists. It didn't give me that feeling, but it's definitely bleak, but it has a good ending. Whereas, spoilers, the original Speak No Evil has not so good of an ending. But I saw this in theaters in Rivergate with my Christian friends. So we saw the movie and then we went to eat at Chick-fil-A, obviously, doing God's work. And I remember feeling ashamed because while I was a Christian at the time, I wasn't as hardcore as they were, so to speak, So like the first thing you see besides the animals is a freaking wiener, it's like, they went with me because I liked horror movies. I'm like, I want to go see this movie. Like, yeah, we'll go with you. It'll be fun. We'll go to church later, eat some Chick-fil-A, pray, penis. It was so striking. And that's always stuck with me. So that's another reason why I like this movie. It ties back to the nostalgia factor. I liked it when it came out. I've owned it ever since it's come out on DVD and Blu-ray, but I have that story tied to it that reminds me of my old past life in college, where I had different friends and different priorities and all that. So I definitely have that nostalgia feeling. It was also, which TJ said, it's the first time I had seen Fast Zombies. I don't know that it's necessarily the first time we've had Fast Zombies in a movie. It's probably not.
It was the
But
first one that really took and people started talking about.
yeah, but that was such a change from what we knew, and it just made it 10 times more terrifying, especially as a chunky person, such as myself. You're telling me I got to start, like, Zombieland touched on that was the number one rule in Zombieland, cardio, right? So I used to always think, oh, I could survive a zombie apocalypse. If they're running, no, I'm gone, dudes. I'm gone. So I really enjoyed that they brought that to light for me for the first time. I think I skipped like the bleakness. Did I already say that his parents? So when he goes back to his parents' house, that's probably the bleakest part of the entire movie, where they killed themselves and died in each other's arms. Like that tied to me back to Titanic. And there's that one scene with the couple in the bed together when the water's pouring in. Like even talking about it just kind of gives me that depressing feeling. Like it's such a heartwarming but heart wrenching situation. Like you're not going to survive, so you end it, and then you just hug each other until you both go. Like that's awful, awful, awful. I also like that the irony. There's so much irony in zombie movies, and Kellen kind of touched on that too. Like the zombies, or whatever we want to call them, they basically revert back to their more primal instincts, and we're like they're the bad guys, but. And Walking Dead has showed us anything is, fear the living. It also reverts the living back to their most primal instincts and desires. Like they get rapey, they get violent, they get greedy. Like it's just insane how something like that can turn everybody bad. Like Rick Grimes is the shining light in a zombie apocalypse. Like he was true good the entire time. Like I would love to, maybe we can make one for this episode, the week of this episode, like the memes you see, it's like true good, neutral good, all that with characters in zombie movies. But I digress. We're gonna wrap things up. I love 28 Days Later. It is my biggest thing I don't like is how it is shot. Like just the graininess. It's just not one of my favorite things, but I understand why it's shot that way. And again, it was kind of the first time we got that, especially us. This came out in 2002, 3. So we just graduated high school for the most part. So we were introduced to this, and it just hit us right in the face. 28 Weeks Later is okay. Who's in that? Hawkeye's in that. It's okay. But I am looking forward to the next one because I don't think Danny Boyle did 28 Weeks Later. So he's doing 28 years later.
Yeah, he produced it. He didn't direct it.
Yeah. So looking forward to him getting back into that chair. But we'll go around, give our rankings, and then we will close up shop. Since I'm already talking, I gave it 4 Cillian Murphy penises out of 5. TJ?
I also gave it 4 out of 5. I think it would be very interesting, like John, to have watched this for the first time now. I probably would also admit I probably wouldn't give it as high because I think it was so influential to a lot of films that built on a lot of what they did here and did it differently, and in some cases better. But I like the ultra realism of this film.
Yeah, for sure. Kellen?
Yeah, 4 for me too. I don't mind the bleakness. I mean, when society crumbles, I mean, the best you can probably hope for in old age is to take a bottle of pills and go in your sleep because you're not outrunning them, especially zombies that run. So I don't mind the bleakness. I think it was probably one of the most real films I had seen at that point in time. I was probably 19. So yeah, I like I said, I really enjoy it, and so 4 for me.
John, bring that down.
No, honestly, it is for me personally. I didn't love it, but I can't like deny it's not a good movie. So I would go 4. It's a good movie. It really is. I just think it didn't
Don't
have
give in to peer pressure, John.
No, it honestly it didn't have the impact on me because I didn't see it at the time. But objectively, it's a really good movie, right? And I'm not gonna be that guy that's like trying to say it's a bad movie. It's not. It's just not for me. But 4 out of 5. Yeah.
And that's fair. And, but I just want to note that you still gave it a grade it deserves, despite some people not liking classic movies like Creepshow and give it terrible scores. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, just a random thought. Anyway,
You're gonna hate me in about 15 minutes.
Oh,
boy.
no. Oh God.
Oh, yeah,
God.
yeah, we are. So
Oh, no.
that's a spoiler for another episode. But all right. So that gives us a 4 overall for 28 Days Later. All right, that's it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. And we have a Facebook group, so go do that. Come back next week. We're going to talk about Motel Hell from 1980. We're also going to be giving away a copy of the movie, so be sure to tune in and listen for one way to get entered into that. Yeah. All right. So signing off, I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time.
Keep it spooky.